stories, please subscribe. Story number 1.
This happened in 2013. I had graduated college the year prior with a degree in education. I wanted to be a teacher and was fortunate to land a job at a nearby high school. The first few weeks I was shadowing another teacher, which they called mentoring, but it felt more like a glorified teaching assistant position. I would sit in the class with the other students and help the teacher when needed. It was a chemistry class, and on one of the lab days, we needed those flasks used for chemical reactions and measuring solutions. All that type of stuff was kept in a supply closet on the other side of the building. I made my way out of the class and started heading over there. After a couple of minutes, I arrived and began looking for the flasks. All of a sudden, my phone went off. It was an automatic text message from the school. Being part of the staff, we were required to sign up to receive these automated messages. The text explained that the school was going into lockdown and that it was not a drill. By the time I would have made it back to my class, the door would have likely already been locked, so I opted to hide in the closet by myself. I turned off the light and closed the door. There wasn't much room to sit down, so I had to just stand there in the dark. After a few seconds, the lockdown alarm sounded from the speakers throughout the building. The usual ambiance from inside nearby classrooms immediately died down. It was now completely quiet, broken only by the sound of my phone going off again. It was an update. It read, "Please remain in lockdown. A suspected armed intruder has entered the building. Police have been notified." I could feel my heart picking up speed. I didn't feel safe where I was. Suddenly, I heard running footsteps in the hall. They ran right up to the closet door and stopped. The doorknob turned, and the door opened before I even had time to react. Standing outside was an older man, maybe in his 50s, wearing a regular t-shirt and jeans. I had never seen the man before. He asked if he could hide in there with me, and feeling bad for the guy, I said yes. There wasn't much room, but we both fit. The man explained how he had been teaching a class down the hall when he heard the lockdown alarm. In my mind, this raised a red flag. Why was he here instead of with his class? I asked him this, but he didn't respond immediately. Interrupting the silence again was the sound of my phone. It was another update from the school. The text said not to open classroom doors for any reason, and that the suspect was believed to be an older man with a beard. I frantically reread the words on my screen. I didn't get the best look at this guy, but from what I did see, he fit that description. I could distinctly hear my heart beating out of my chest. I made a split-second decision. I opened the closet door and ran. I went straight to the nearest exit and out to my car in the parking lot. When I got there, I looked back behind me. I didn't see anything. I don't think the man followed me, or at least he didn't follow me outside. From there, I got in my car and left. About 25 minutes later, I received a final update text explaining that the police had cleared the building and the lockdown was over. I later learned that a man had gotten inside by convincing the front desk that he was there to pick up his kid. A lockdown was called when they saw a gun holster around his waist as he walked down the hall. Several teachers reported their classroom doors being forcefully struck during the lockdown by someone trying to open them. The man was gone when police arrived, and they were never able to identify him. He was caught on the school's security cameras, but they never showed a full view of his face. However, they did show that he was indeed armed. I saw the videos myself, and I'm almost sure it was the same man hiding with me. The light was also dark in that closet, so I can't be certain.
Story number 2.
Back in October of 2016, for whatever reason, there were numerous killer clown sightings reported across America. Real or fake videos of these clowns would frequently get posted online. It was all over the news that entire month. In our town, the situation got out of hand. People were committing real crimes while wearing clown masks or sometimes full-body clown outfits. It was genuinely terrifying. During this time, I was in high school. Throughout that month, many staff and student emails received threats from different random email addresses, making them difficult to block. The emails often had addresses like Killer Clownu CVX, Dies I, or something similar, with Killer Clown followed by random characters. The threats became so frequent that the school had to send out a mass email to all students and parents, stating they were aware of the threats and taking them seriously. On certain days, teachers were instructed to keep their classroom doors locked and weren't allowed to leave, even to use the bathroom. Needless to say, a lot of us were on edge. It was really scary, and I have no shame in admitting that. I saw some of the emails, and they were graphic and truly disturbing. None of us knew if anyone was planning to act on these threats, or if it was just someone behind a computer screen playing a sick joke. It felt like only a matter of time before something would happen. Finally, one day it did. I was in my trigonometry class when the school's lockdown alarm went off. The principal's voice came over the loudspeaker, and his voice was shaky. Our principal was usually pretty intimidating, so hearing fear in his voice only heightened my own fear. I knew this lockdown had to be related to the threats. In our classroom, there wasn't a good corner for all of us to hide in. You could see a good portion of the room from outside the door. Our teacher ordered us to barricade the door with all the desks and chairs in the room. We then sat as far away from the door as possible, although this still provided a clear view of the glass window on the door. I watched as the hallway lights abruptly turned off, followed by the lights in the classroom. The familiar hum of the heating system faded as the school cut the power. It was eerie. The whole building was quiet. There wasn't the usual whispering or joking around from other students like during practice drills. Even our teacher had a look of fear on his face, which put me more on edge. We sat there for several minutes in silence. Then we heard a metal banging sound, like someone hitting the lockers down the hall. A few students started yelling. The girl next to me quietly began crying. The noises continued off and on for the next few minutes, getting louder as whoever was making them seemingly got closer. My classmates and I were staring at each other, gauging each other's reactions. Then we heard the classroom door handle rattling. I looked up and saw a clown mask looking through the glass on the door. The person stood there for a while before ducking down out of view, continuing to rattle the door handle. They were trying to pick the lock. We listened as the lock disengaged, and immediately, the full body force of the person smashed into the door. The desks barricading the door slightly shifted back. This happened a few more times, but not much progress was made. They eventually gave up, and we heard their footsteps running away down the hall. When the police arrived, they cleared the building and escorted us out. No one was ever found responsible for the lockdown. It's believed that at least 3 people dressed in clown costumes entered the back entrance of the school that day, intent on making good on the threats sent via email. At the time, the school had some cameras, but during the lockdown, they cut the power, so nothing was caught on video. School was canceled for the next few days. When we returned, the school had installed a new auto-locking feature on the doors and windows.
Story number 3.
This happened a long time ago when I was in school. Our school was required to perform at least 2 lockdown drills each year, but our principal always had us do more, like 3 or 4, so I was pretty used to them. All the teachers would always warn us ahead of time to avoid any panic. That morning, as I walked into my first period class, my history teacher informed us that the school would be having a lockdown drill that day. I actually kind of liked them because it meant we'd have less work to do, considering they always took about 20 or 25 minutes. 30 minutes into class, a short buzzer went off, followed by our principal's voice on the intercom. Like every other drill, he explained that the school was going into lockdown, but it was just a practice drill. He mentioned that in a real lockdown, the buzzer would sound for longer, and there would be no intercom announcement. Our teacher instructed us to shut the curtains and gather in the corner of the classroom that was not visible from the outside door. He then shut off the lights and locked the door. For the next few minutes, we sat in silence. Eventually, we heard footsteps outside. It was the principal trying every classroom door to ensure they were locked and that the classes were responding correctly to the lockdown. Before I knew it, the drill was over. The day progressed, and I was now sitting in my physics class, which was right after lunch. At some point, I ducked out of the class to use the bathroom. Our school building had a basement with a bathroom that was much more private and less busy, so I always tried to use that one. There were a couple of classrooms down there, so it didn't look weird for me to be there. I was sitting in one of the back stalls, the only one in there, which was usually the case. Suddenly, I heard the lockdown buzzer start going off in the hall. It sounded for about a full minute before abruptly stopping. I waited for the principal's voice to come over the speakers, but it never did, which, as mentioned earlier, was supposed to signify a real lockdown. At first, I didn't think it was a real lockdown. It happened too close to the practice lockdown earlier that morning. I thought it was just a second part of the drill. But as I sat there for a few more minutes, I realized that if it were part of the drill, it would have been explained over the intercom. I started to panic, thinking this was real. I wasn't safe in the bathroom. The door had no lock, so I ran outside to find a classroom. There weren't many options in that basement, and it was hard to see now that they turned the hall lights off. I eventually found a classroom door and tried the handle. It was locked. I looked through the glass part of the door and could barely make out a kid hiding in one of the corners. There was a class inside. I banged on the door, explaining that I was a student trying to hide. I got no response. I was both terrified and frustrated, realizing the protocol was to never let anyone inside, no matter what. I was on my own. I thought about going back to the bathroom, but found an empty computer lab first and settled on that. I got under one of the back desks and, for the second time that day, sat in silence. Only this time, it was for a real lockdown. 10 minutes went by, with nothing, not even an update over the intercom. Then I heard the heart-dropping sound of running footsteps from outside coming down the basement stairs. The person's heavy breathing kept getting closer, sounding like they were just outside the room. I started adjusting my body position to try and duck down more to get further out of view when a light turned on. It was the light from the computer on the desk above me waking up. I must have accidentally pulled the mouse cord. The light wasn't that bright, but it was enough for me to make out a silhouette in the doorway to the room. I genuinely feared for my life in that moment. The person was just standing there. I prayed they wouldn't enter the room, and after what felt like an eternity, they turned and continued running down the hallway. A few minutes later, the lockdown was over. The school tried to keep the incident silent, but it eventually got out. Apparently, a kid in my grade that I slightly knew stole his dad's gun and got into the school through a back door he left propped open earlier in the day. The police showed up and detained him before any bullets were shot. They later searched his backpack and found a paper with a list of names, which they believed were his intended targets. Pictures of the list leaked, and my name was number 4 on it. I never found out if the kid got scared and decided not to do anything, or if he genuinely didn't find anybody after entering the building. Either way, I believe the person I saw while hiding in the computer lab was him, and I could have lost my life in that moment.